나와 신나고 뻔게 또 신나 샤바와키 신나무 기그라니 짜이 샤바기라니 짜이 뭐 기그라니
What are you gonna do if Trump wins? I grew up in a middle-class family. What are you gonna do about the economy? Has it been 3 hours already? It's been 2 minutes. 2 minutes? Yeah. And we gotta do this for 3 hours? Yeah. Can you edit this to make it look like I talked for 3 hours? We don't do that. 3 hours later. I grew up in a middle-class family. We are a strong people. We have dreams and breathe oxygen. So, am I the best interview you ever had?
Yep, I can't wait for that interview to happen. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name's Luke Rudowski here of thebestpoliticalshow.com, and we will be going live for the next 2 hours discussing all the craziest and the latest news developing right now, as of course there's a lot of things to talk about, especially the larger kind of Fox News interview, a first kind of ever contentious interview between Kamala Harris and Fox News. She's actually sitting down with people who don't completely agree with her and aren't on her payroll. What in the world's going on here? Well, that's exactly what we are going to be discussing live, and we are going to be reacting to it. And then we're going to do introductions because it looks like the interview has already started. Let's just jump right into it.
3 million.
Brett, let's just get to the point, okay? The point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico?
She regrets this interview.
Of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising.
Okay.
And
Let's go. I love this already. This is great.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress.
Even Bill Clinton is saying there needs to be more vetting.
That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people.
Which is
It would have
record
allowed
numbers
us to
in the
put more
United States,
resources
probably
into
shipped in by the
prosecuting
CIA.
transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you,
but actually is focused on fixing it.
6 Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced.
It's not my fault.
As I
loss
opened the
that
border.
should not have occurred.
But they did.
So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election. Because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President,
What a
it was a
filibuster.
policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungary's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss.
Shaking her head. Yeah.
I'm so sorry for her loss.
Nonverbal is not the truth.
Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you
Brett,
want to answer
in all fairness, I told you I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration, even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed.
You've been clear.
We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist, they will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that's going to get fixed, Brett.
Well,
that's how this system works.
That's the premise of this question.
But
there were
that's how the system
90-plus
works.
executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock. I get it.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. Right. So do you support that?
What a good point.
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
No, but let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally, and I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Yikes.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
Amazing question.
I will follow the law. And it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aide said that he never advocated for that prison policy, and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though.
They say
on plans for the American people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
That's what you did.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works, that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So, you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. Ooh. And like every new president that comes in to office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years, so what are you turning the page from?
And you would do nothing different.
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
Great question.
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk for anyone.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. We've got to think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you...
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
That's what you did.
This is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump...
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump... he's misguided. You say now he's unstable.
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Oof.
Joe Biden,
wow.
I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President, two more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the #1 threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, in the several hours on each occasion that Iran posed a threat to Israel, I was there. Most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself, and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies were getting funded by
my commitment
Iran.
to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration that
Iran regime
that we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
Well, I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, I hope she walks out.
On the subject of Iran, I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a decision
and there are critics
that they feel
who look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here.
Of course they are.
I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more to say.
There are a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and that's why we invited you here.
I invite everyone to go to KamalaHarris.com, and you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do
and that's why we invited you here
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
and
they're giving me a hard rap here.
Well, I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm surprised they didn't pull him out of there. Holy cow, what an utter crap show. She was so angry. There was a total meltdown. You could see her being so uncomfortable, and this is why she hasn't done any contentious interviews. This is why she's being absolutely just blown out of the water with these interviews that truly are just surprising and shocking. I don't know about you guys, but holy cow, I'm impressed by Fox News. I never thought I would say that personally myself. We're joined by an astute panel of some really awesome people. As of course, Matt Kim brought a surprise guest. That surprise guest is Chris Pavlovsky, the head of Rumble, who is also joining us here in studio, which is absolutely incredible, Chris. Thank you so much. Matt, thank you so much for bringing us this amazing guest that provides us some free speech and is fighting for our rights to actually have a voice in this country during a key moment in a time where the future of this country is going to be decided by the people who speak the most. So thank you guys so much for coming. Matt, thank you so much for this great guest coming in studio. For the people who don't know you, just shortly introduce yourselves before we give our kind of reaction to what we just saw on the boob tube.
Well, I'm Matt Kim, and I'm happy to be here. And it's so cool. And I said I'm going to bring a special guest, and you're like, who is it? Is it going to get me canceled? I don't think so. I think you'll be all right. And I thought it'd be a good surprise. And I was hanging out with Chris, and I said, bro, we got to go.
Yeah, he might get us canceled, but it's okay. I'm okay with
It's
that.
worth it.
I'm all right with that. I'm all right because if we get canceled, Chris is going to help us out. Right, Chris?
That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. If you can just bring up the microphone a little bit closer so we could hear you, Chris. For the people who might not know who you are, how would you introduce yourself to the world out there?
So I'm the CEO and founder of Rumble. I founded it in 2013. I think a lot of you guys are watching us on Rumble right now. So
we're live on Rumble right now on the bestpoliticalshow.com, which redirected right to rumble.com.
Awesome. Yep. So and that was an interesting interview. I caught only the end part. Like we didn't, we came in a little later, so we didn't get to see the beginning. But I'd like to hear the recap of how that started, but the end seemed pretty contentious.
It was just as contentious as it was all throughout the duration of it. It kind of reached its crescendo moment where you saw all of her teeth come out, and she was just absolutely seething. Lauren De Laguna also in the house as well. Lauren, who are you?
Hi, I'm Lauren De Laguna, as you just said, and you can find me on X and Instagram and Rumble and all the good stuff.
Steph, who are you?
This is Steph. We are Change, and I'm pushing the buttons.
All right. It's good to have a jam-packed house here. It's always awesome to have a lot of people to be a part of the larger kind of conversation here. But she was asked a lot of very serious questions in the beginning about immigration, about the trans issues, and she never answered them. She kept giving empty political slogan after empty political slogan, never really delving into these issues or addressing the kind of criticisms behind them. And you saw someone that couldn't take the heat here. I don't know, because there's rumors now that she's going to be doing Rogan next week for about 2 hours, supposedly. We'll see if that, of course, happens. But I think what was happening here, she was kind of testing the waters to see how she could handle certain pressures, to see how she could handle a contentious interview. And for me, she looked absolutely awful. This was a horrible kind of reaction. This was a horrible way to try to speak to your constituents. And it's a larger signal of her becoming more desperate, because if you look at the poll numbers, they're splitting wide open more than her legs. You look at the numbers. They're not good. They're not favorable for her. And I think this interview was extremely telling, and probably larger kind of hallmarkers to more desperate actions by the Kamala Harris campaign that we're going to be seeing within the next 20 days. But that's just my 2 cents. Matt, what did you think?
Well, did she do any word saladding? I missed it. I didn't. We missed the first half.
Too bad on the word salad, but what she did, for instance, when they were talking about the border issue, she gave, instead of like jumping straight into it, she listed before we even got into this issue or this issue or this issue or this, and she made a list. I think I counted 5 different things before she even got to her flipping point, was that she tried to pass a bill that didn't get passed, and the reason that it didn't pass was because it was an awful bill, and even though it would have sent more agents to the border, the bill still had the catch and release policies, which we see are not working, and resulted in death of 3 lovely ladies, which she did not apologize for. There was a mom that Brett showed on his screen that was crying, blaming her specifically and Biden specifically for their policies that resulted in the death of their daughter. And he was like, what do you want to say to that mom? And she's like, oh, that sucks. Sucks to suck.
Yeah, would you apologize to her? And she's like, yes, I would. Literally shaking her head. It was interesting because I believe they were going to do a longer interview, and you could see Brett say twice, hey, they're giving me the strong signal here. They cut the interview short, in my opinion.
Why?
I know how this works, because when I interview people and when I interview politicians, they usually have handlers, and the handlers are like, that's it, cut it off, get out of here, stop it. And that's what Brett brought up twice, saying, hey, I know your people are giving me a hard out here, which is something that was not expected to happen.
Right.
So they probably saw this as an utter disaster, and her team and her PR management team behind her were like, throw in the towel. She's done.
I got
She's
something
cooked.
to say. I got something to say, because I have a feeling that this is going to be super flipped, you guys. At first, she starts with the I'm speaking kind of vibe, where it's like, I'm a woman, how could you? And then she kind of switches to the more aggressive stance. And I have a feeling that all of this is going to be kind of played and flipped, where it's like, oh, this bad man at Fox didn't like allow me to speak. And she also kind of preface this point by showing, oh, you know, I'm here trying to show you the difference between me and Donald Trump. Like, isn't that why I'm supposed to be here? So I have a feeling that, like, when you're rooting for someone, you always want to look at them the way that you see them. So I'm trying to look at it through the Democratic point of view. I'm trying to look at it through the women that are like, oh man, that Fox man was so mean to her. You know, like, I have a feeling that there could be some sort of scripted way to save this, to salvage how bad it was.
If she would have played like she was the victim, then
At first,
but she was angry. She was angry.
And then
no
she
one's gonna feel
switched.
sympathy. No one's gonna feel sympathy for her with how angry and how much she was lashing out and how much she just deflected all of the answers and then tried to blame everything on Trump. If you look at all of her answers, it's like, yeah, but Trump. Yeah, but Trump did this. It was never about her policies. It was never about I'm going to do this. It was always a kind of runaround, kind of empty political slogan that I think a lot of people are like, this is ridiculous. This is something that you want me to get behind? She can't even stand the heat of Brett Barr. Brett Barr isn't even known as kind of a hardcore confrontational interviewer.
Nice.
He did ask legitimate, significant, hard questions, but she couldn't even handle that.
He's not Peter Doocy, you know?
Yes.
He's Brett, and he's usually somewhat moderate, but he's legitimately tough and fair. Peter could be maybe a bit biased and strong-worded and quite annoying, but in like the best way possible. So this was somewhat, it definitely wasn't a softball, but she should have been more prepared. However, if you look at Kamala now versus like 4 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, she is doing significantly better. She didn't cackle once. She stuck to her talking points. She, even though she didn't do like the word salads a bit, she had stayed on what everything she said made logical sense. It was just a lot of fluff. She added a lot of fluff in places where she needed to stop and think. I noticed she mentioned unburden, and everybody thought about her word salad of where we are unburdened by what has been. And
Did she do the hand signs too, or you
where
gotta do the hand sign,
I'm
otherwise it
burdened
doesn't
by
count.
what has been.
Yeah. The immigration topics, I think, were the most kind of eye-opening ones, and it definitely seemed like they could have been talking about it for a while. I think you brought up a point that you messaged everyone in the kind of group chat saying there's literally people on the southern border who are wearing "Thank You Biden" T-shirts.
Yes.
There's a reason, the border has been left wide open, and you saw Kamala very poorly try to obfuscate that, tried to kind of put on this larger illusion for the American public that for some reason it wasn't her, it wasn't me, it wasn't my policies, it wasn't the Biden administration that opened up all these borders, it wasn't any of that. It was, as of course, we have a lot of very serious issues in this country. We got a lot of articles also to point the significant issues in crime, especially the crime statistics that the FBI came out today and admitted that they fudged, that have been going up dramatically, mainly because of these illegal immigration policies that have spurred on a lot of criminals to come from Latin America into the United States. Chris, you saw a little bit of this kind of, people are saying this was a debate. This wasn't even an interview. This was a debate and largely an argument. What's your understanding? Do you think this is going to help her or hit her in the polls?
So, quick question. How long was that interview? Was that only 30 minutes?
That was less than 30 minutes. That was about 28 or 24 minutes.
No commercial break in between.
No commercial break.
So 24-minute interview.
Yep.
He starts at 6 and it ends like
It just ended,
So
yeah.
we only caught like 5 minutes of this.
5 or 10 minutes,
Not
something like
even,
that. Yeah.
Like actually listening, probably 5 minutes, 4 minutes. That's mind blowing. So did they have that scheduled for the full hour? Was that the idea?
That's probably what they did. They were like, hey, we'll do a full-on interview, but they cut it short, as Brett admitted.
So this is pretty much a walk-off.
Yes. Yeah.
If that's the case, then like she didn't do the interview. She walked off the interview.
Which is amazing.
This
Yeah.
is she didn't even do half of it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it's like I was anticipating a full hour. Brett Baer's got a full hour at 6 o'clock, right? And we thought we were going to see more than half
It
here.
started and ended.
That goes to show, though,
Yeah.
that Brett is pretty soft. Like, he was relatively fair. He's going to acknowledge the fact that she's being told to go and let her go. Like, if you had Peter, if you had somebody who is more of a hardball. She would have just been stuck there. They would have put on their blinders and made her actually physically get up and walk out.
If it was me and I got Kamala Harris in front of me and I got all these other people saying, cut it, stop, we got to get out of here. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Like, we're going to continue to have this conversation. And, Brett is kind of known for not being a kind of hard kind of, interviewer. He's known for kind of taking it easy on people. So I think that's why he kind of acquiesced here. But if it was me, I absolutely wouldn't take that.
I think this was a walk-off. I think this is the closest thing to a walk-off you could have with, this wasn't an interview. And I think that's what the headline should be, is that Kamala Harris couldn't handle an interview.
But that's what they're going to hide.
She left. She left within 25 minutes.
And they're not going to say that. They're going to be like, because she even said, oh, thank you for your time. Goodbye. Like, the way she ended it was like, oh, it's not me. It's just that you don't have enough time for me.
Right. And remember when Trump walked out of the CNN interview, and I forget exactly what the circumstances were, but they highly edited it to make it look like he was annoyed and upset and like ripped off his mic, but he stayed behind and, he shook hands and he left because it was time. And now Kamala's doing the exact same thing that Trump was accused of doing, but she actually left. I think it's because it wasn't a pre-recording. It was a live tape. That was actually somewhat brave of her. I'm really, really praying that she goes on Joe Rogan, because that will be a catastrophe. Joe Rogan's not going to sit there and let her handlers take her out of there. He's just going to sit there with a joint in his hand.
If Joe Rogan is listening, you need to do this in a vault where you could close the door behind you and make sure no one could stop this interview from moving forward in any way, shape, or form. As of course, Reuters today reported Harris could join Joe Rogan podcast and hunt for male votes. As you look at the poll numbers, she's not doing good at all. Look at these numbers. It's an utter disaster. This is Polymarket, of course, showing the clear lead from Donald Trump in the betting markets, as it's fair to say that she is very desperate and is only going to become more desperate from here. Will she be desperate enough to do the Joe Rogan podcast episode? Well, I think after that interview, I don't think that's going to happen.
How long was her Call Me Daddy interview for?
I have no idea.
So she sits down. I mean, it was longer than this. So she can't even speak to conservatives, which is the party that she should be trying to impress upon. I mean, you see Trump going to liberal stations. You see Vance going to liberal stations all the time. And what does she do while hurricane's raging on? She's sitting on a podcast talking about vaginas.
It's because there's a sense of imposter syndrome here. Like, you hear Vance, he knows what he's talking about. He's confident of what he's portraying to the people. And versus Kamala, I don't believe that she's confident with what she's portraying. She's kind of like snaking through the policies that someone's telling her to push, and she's switching her policies all the time. Someone had to write a list of whatever amount of policies are there on her website because she can't answer to them. Just go check out my website and you can find out because someone else put it there for me. Like, this lady has a history of snaking her way through. If you look at her resume, if you watch the interview that was just done with Tucker Carlson about her, it's huge. There's a lot of bomb droppings about what this lady's history is
Snaking
in regards
her way
to
through or sucking her way through.
Oh gosh. Well,
so what happens to Brett Baer's show if it ended 30 minutes? He's just sitting there in the
commentary
chair,
afterwards,
commentary
probably
from that chair.
Yeah.
Is he going into a studio right now? Like,
they're just gonna replay it. They got nothing else to show. They're just like, all right,
watch it twice.
I think this was so unexpected that that would be some interesting filler they have to put there.
Yeah, no. Like, how do you fill in the rest of that other than just like your kind of reactions to all of this? We're watching Fox News now, and it's just Brett kind of describing the situation of what he kind of went through there. But this is something that Donald Trump usually goes through every single day. If you look at the comparison between him and Kamala Harris can't stand the heat. She can't stand any kind of contention. She can't stand any small legitimate pushback, even with just her own words being used against her. Donald Trump gets attacked viciously. He has these gotcha questions. He has all these people investigating him more than, as he mentioned himself, Al Capone. And he has to deal with contention all the time. He walks into it and he handles it a lot better. I think a lot of people are looking at it and they're kind of asking themselves, who do you want sitting next to Kim Jong-un or I was going to say Mao Zedong, pardon me, or Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin? Do you want someone that can handle the contention or someone that freaks out and gets angry? And for me, I would prefer absolutely to have Donald Trump in there, who could, of course, handle the heat, handle the pressure that Kamala Harris clearly can't handle.
Looks like she's ramping up for maybe a Joe Rogan. So she did Call Her Daddy, and then she did Charlemagne just a couple days ago, which was really interesting. Horrible, but interesting to learn a lot of. And then she does Brett Baer, which gives you an idea of what opposition would look like, because the Charlemagne thing was just layup after layup after layup, a lie, and then she called everything else disinformation and misinformation. And he just agreed with everything that she said, which was disgusting and so spineless, by the way.
Charlemagne's always spineless and always gives layups, yet still always gets the best quote. Like, for instance, he's the one that got the Hillary hot sauce quote. Like, what do you always have on you? Oh, I always have hot sauce in my purse. Oh, do you? Or are you just speaking to a black gentleman? She also got the, if you don't know if you're for me or Trump, you ain't black. Oh, Biden, maybe don't do that. I don't know how he always gets these quotes. And now Kamala, I almost feel like he's a deep state Republican, the only one.
Oh, well, the questions were very kind of, soft and easy. They weren't like Brett. If you look at a lot of these interviews, especially with the Democratic kind of establishment, they literally hand the questions before the interview. They're like, you're going to ask us this, you're going to read the script, and you're going to be our little puppet. And most of the corporate media is like, yeah. It's kind of clear that Fox News didn't play along those lines, and they didn't give her questions beforehand, and that this was surprisingly an actual legitimate interview. Could it be that independent media is finally putting pressure on the corporate media to actually ask legitimate questions? I think there's a factor in this as well, as independent media is literally taking the huge share of viewers away from them, and a lot of people are turning to alternative independent media more than ever. I don't know, Matt, you kind of came out of nowhere recently, and you've been able to galvanize a lot of people that are paying attention to what you're saying. What do you see as far as this larger kind of transition here amongst this kind of revolution, I would say evolution, that's happening with people sourcing their own information independently and not just going through, of course, the authoritative sources?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. People are sick of being lied to. People are sick of trying to figure out what's real, what's not real. They're going towards people that they feel are honest, genuine. They just want to trust the people that they're dealing with, right? They don't want to have information just thrown at them anymore. They want to know where it's coming from. People are starting to ask a lot of questions, which I think is fantastic. And I think platforms like Rumble are really helping to disseminate that information, get people that had been voiceless to get their voices back. And I think that's really important in what we're seeing right now, because we all saw during 2020 what that looks like. When you say something and they disagree and they shut you down, they shut everyone down. And places that are for free speech are so essential because, as we all know, the first thing they come for is your speech. They come for your speech, then they come for your movement, and then they come for your guns. It's in that order.
Yes.
So free speech is like essential. We have to protect it at all costs.
Absolutely. Chris, what are you seeing on the front lines? Because you're in the trenches. You're dealing with the lawsuits, the government's coming at you. How do you kind of define and where do you think the current state is of this kind of independent alternative media versus these kind of corporate conglomerate giants out there?
Yeah, and I was talking to Matt about this earlier today. It's shifting a lot. It's tilted a lot in the last year, I would say. Obviously, Elon having a big impact with X, Truth, and Rumble. You have a bunch of platforms that are really shifting the course of everything. But this election and what we're looking at right now is becoming so pivotal. I feel like all this shift and movement that's happened the last year can disappear within one day. And we have to be very, very conscious of that, because it may look good right now and things might look good, but if it doesn't go the right way, things can get very, very bad. And what I've noticed over the last 3 years, and this is the one thing that I was talking to Matt about, is that there's like 3 things that I see that call it the left, call it the censorship complex, call it whatever you want to call it. There's 3 different pillars that are working against things like Rumble and things against free speech. You have big tech. You have the investor community, which I will say is Vanguard, BlackRock, Fidelity, all these major institutions that basically fund and buy companies, shares of companies. And then you have the corporate America and the advertising cartels. So those three pillars kind of work in hand. And I would put the BlackRocks and the Vanguards as at the very top of this pyramid of control. They, through their ESG programs and through them buying shares in companies, they then go and push companies around to select the boards of these companies. So for example, they'll go and tell a company to say, you need this type of director on your company, and if you don't put this type of director within your company, we are going to vote against you at the next proxy vote. So every company's scared shitless to go against this.
What?
Because they own, millions and millions of shares, and they can harm the company and the shareholders. So all these companies comply with this. They end up putting in these people onto their board that are extremely woke, extremely left. And then when you think about that, this runs through all of large corporate America. Large corporate America then says, hey, I want to do an advertising campaign with Rumble or X for 10 million, 20 million, a large campaign. And that has to maybe get board approval or go through some committee. And that gets shot down immediately because they've already hijacked the entire board and the entire company in terms of policy decisions that are very ideological. So this then translates into basically censoring the entire right, or I don't even like calling it left or right. I like calling it either the inside, or you're on the outside.
Can we call it free and controlled?
Yeah, perfect. That's much better. Free and controlled. So this translates into making sure that people that are on the outside of this ring that have no power don't ever get any power, and they end up controlling the information flow to make sure the dollars and the economics go towards the content and the information that they want. And when that happens, that's essentially censoring and stopping the economy for a whole different information flow from happening. Because if you can't afford to put this mic here, then you're not going to be talking in the mic. Whereas the other person that can afford it because they're getting all these brand dollars and ads is going to be able to have a really nice mic and a lot better studio and going to be able to have a much better production and have a production, essentially, because what they've tried to do is completely cut it off. And then you layer in big tech. And big tech is the final layer where they literally are turning off the information flow at the very source. So if you somehow get through social media, well, now we're going to shut you off. So in combination from the investor community down to corporate America and big tech overlaying on top of that, the left or the deep state or whatever you want to call it has put a stranglehold on the information flow that is out there and has cut off essentially half the population's ability to get the whole population's ability to get proper information flow, both sides of the story. And that's what I see. I see that. I live that. That's what we're fighting against. We're fighting to make sure that every side of every story is out there. There's no such thing as misinformation, disinformation. It's information. And when you get information, you get to choose. We're smart enough as people to choose what's right and what's wrong. We have a brain to kind of go through that. We don't need someone telling us that. That's no one's job. It's our job with our own brain to kind of figure out what's right and what's wrong. And we decide that as individuals. And anyone trying to tell you that what you should believe and what you should hear and what you can see is not a good person.
Yeah.
Period.
It's hard to come up with your own decisions and be right about everything all the time because the data that we have is flawed. So how can your conclusion be correct all the time? You're inevitably going to have some sort of misinformation or disinformation because it's impossible that someone is always correct.
Except if you're Kamala Harris.
In which case, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Except if you're the FBI. That never lies.
Never lies, unless it's murder numbers, which is crazy.
Or crime statistics and violent crimes. And,
So what do you think the solution is, though? Obviously, you've created Rumble, which is the alternative media to YouTube and is like a free speech platform. But do conservatives need to get together and make like an alternative to BlackRock and Vanguard and then start using their own dollar bills to create but then again, you'll just have like a conservative version of this bubble and you'll just have two separate bubbles.
So there's actually laws, the Sherman Act, antitrust laws, that don't allow this to happen. corporate America cannot come together with 90% of its power and create brand safety rules that encompass all these companies on how to purchase media. That's actually an antitrust violation, and that's why we sued GARM with Elon Musk and X, and they disbanded GARM 2 days later after that. And let's all ask why they did that. They most likely did that because there's a there. So now GARM ceases to exist, but our lawsuits are going to continue. So the solution, though, from the way I see it right now, is you can use the Sherman Act, but that takes too long. You can sue, but we're not going to see. We're in an antitrust lawsuit with Google. We're in an antitrust lawsuit with GARM. So we're doing as much as we can from our side, but this takes too long. The court systems don't move as fast as you want them to move. So, but I do think, come this election, if the right candidate comes into power, the more pro-free speech candidate comes into power, that's going to be a major victory. And it's going to be a major victory for free speech. It's going to be a major victory against censorship and the people that are like, the government right now is like they've actively tried to censor. They've actively tried to tell people what they can and cannot see or cannot read or cannot watch. And that is a violation of the First Amendment and is absolutely something that should not happen. So I think it's like absolutely imperative right now that the right government gets into power, because if we don't pick the right government to get into power right now, then we're in a very, very dire situation, because this censorship you saw and all the movement that we've had in the last year with Elon buying X, with Rumble going public, with all these things happening, it could get a lot worse, the censorship, and they might pass laws, they might push things that we never foresaw to happen, even though thankfully we have a Supreme Court that's very in favor of everything, in favor of the First Amendment. And there's a lot of constitutionalists on there and originalists, but it's very important to be able to have a government that's going to actually advocate for the First Amendment and actually protect the Constitution the way in which they're supposed to do it, because they're not doing it currently.
And I think on the consumer side, it's really important that people continue to talk, people continue to put their ideas out there, because the reality is that they can't cancel everybody. If only a few get canceled, then people don't really notice and people fight back. But if everyone were to push back, then you can't go around and cancel everyone. Who's going to consume all their media? Who's going to download their app? Who's going to buy all their goods? Who's going to watch their ads? The whole thing actually falls apart. Yep. It's because people self-censor, and it's because people don't push back is why the situation exists. We give them the power. But if we take it back by continuing to push back against them constantly over and over again, then actually brings the power back, because then they lose their sponsors, they lose their numbers, they lose their revenue. They can't cancel everyone. They just can't. Yep. There's actually a lot of us on this side.
How do you fight? You mentioned ESG.
Before asking some questions, I just kind of want to add some a little bit more context to everything. No, great. No, there's a lot of important things we want to get into.
Went off rail.
But I've been fighting this fight for about 15 years, 5 years of which, when I first started, we had a free and open internet. I was able to help produce things like Loose Change and other kind of Alex Jones documentaries that went mega viral on Google Video. Google Video, of course, turned into YouTube. I went to YouTube. First, I was on blip.tv. Horrible decision. Ustream, horrible decision. I finally got over to YouTube after getting millions and millions of views on blip.tv. No one even knows what that is. It's just a blip now. But 5 years being on YouTube, I was like, wait, hold on. I'm seeing something happening here that's kind of alarming. And if you go back, we have videos 15 years ago specifically warning, hey, free speech is directly under attack. We see it coming. We see it encroaching. We see it happening in very kind of weird, underhanded ways. It's happening to us. We were the first channel on YouTube to ever be demonetized. No one even knew what demonetized was. And they're like, what happened here? We're like, we have no idea. I snuck in, confronted the head of all the YouTube top executives at all these secret parties in San Francisco. And I was like, tell me what's going on.
That should be a
we'll
t-shirt,
fix it right away.
You totally have to put that on your branding.
Yeah. We confronted Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, face to face about this very specific issue, and then he cowered and screamed and cursed at us, freaking out.
That would totally be in my Twitter profile. First demonetized channel on YouTube. Like, you own that.
Yeah. No. We made a bunch of T-shirts about it too, saying all my favorite channels are demonetized or deleted on YouTube. But no, this is a fight that I think people really forget how key and critical it is, because if we don't have free speech, we don't have anything. I know some people like to talk about the Second Amendment. It doesn't matter. What matters most is our ability to discern information in real time as it comes in. That is a super-like power that they are deathly afraid of, and they're losing the grips of power and authority. You saw what Hillary Clinton said just a few days ago. Hillary Clinton said it's the free internet that's allowing us to lose control over the population. That's exactly what's happening, and they deserve to lose control because they lose control because of the truth. The truth has the power to, of course, take away all these evil reigns and all these people that thrive off of our ignorance. This is really the Renaissance. This is really the evolution that we're seeing transform within our eyes, that, Chris, you're on the forefront of, that I appreciate of, that we are using as much as we can right now, as, of course, we do 1 hour on all the technocratic gulag platforms. And now this is the hour that we move over exclusively just to rumble.com/wearechange, or thebestpoliticalshow.com, same URL, or of course, just go to the front page of rumble.com. As we're going to be ending it here, we usually do a 2-hour show. Feel free to stay as long as you want, because I know you got a bunch of stuff you got to do as well.
I got a flight.
So if you got a flight, you
I
leave.
can do another 10 minutes.
Leave whenever you want. We're going now exclusively over to Rumble, and we're leaving all these other platforms. Follow us there, subscribe there, because the conversation continues exclusively there in a totally unfiltered way, just on rumble.com/wearechange. Before transferring over and leaving these technocratic gulag platforms, Matt, where can people find you?
If you go to whatever your preferred doom scroll device mechanism is, you can find me. Just look up Matt Kim, or come hang out with me on Rumble.
Awesome. Lauren.
Yeah, you can find me at Lauren De Laguna. That's DELAGUNA on all the platforms.
Awesome. Chris, where can people find out more information about you?
At Chris on Truth Social, at Chris Pavlovsky on X, and Chris Rumble on Rumble.
Steph?
You can find me on X at StephWRC.
Vote with your dollar, vote with your clicks, vote with your attention. Don't just vote every 4 years. You vote in many different ways, and I think this is one of the best ways that you could vote. We're also going to be going to callers for members of LukeUnfiltered.com. Stay tuned for that. And a lot